Welcome to a brand new edition of Things I Think I Know on the OBR streaming network. My name is Brad Ward. I am with my esteemed panel here. Next to me, of course, the always fantastic Quincy Carrier. Follow him on Twitter at Quen_C. And below me, Chubb Strong Case at Casey_Kinnamon. Loving the nickname tonight, Casey. What's going on? Good to have you guys with me for Things I Think I Know. On this Friday evening, going into a football weekend here in the fall. I don't know what the weather's like down there, Quincy or Case. You guys are both down south, right? So
the misconception, it gets cold in the south. Like it's not
night.
California.
Yeah, at night it gets nippy.
At night and in the morning, like you'll wake up and it's like 32 degrees, now it's like snow or something like that. But it'll get to 32, get to 60 for a couple hours a day. And look, you think that's nothing, but going from 32 to 60 on one day, you'll feel how cold and hot that is.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it's been like. This week was like that here in Northeast Ohio. It was like 30 in the mornings, 60, 50, 60 in the afternoons. It's supposed to be night this weekend. After that, I think it's gonna get cold. Last winter we only had like 5 days of freezing, like really cold weather. So
yes,
global warming, real thing, maybe. I don't know. So but that's for another show.
That's a different show, man.
Yep, it's a different show. I know you're struggling down there, Case, with the hurricane stuff. Hopefully you're through the worst of it there, brother. So it's damn hurricanes, man. 2 of them.
Yeah, they got it much worse about an hour north of me in Asheville. I know that. They took a brunt. They took a beating up here.
Yeah. Hopefully, all right. Hopefully everybody can get out there safe.
Yes. For sure. And all right, so a lot going on with the Browns this week. We got Stadium, Chubb coming back, great letter. Cooper's out in Buffalo, and we got the Bengals, first divisional game at home. Browns are 1-5. Bengals are a much better team than they are. Their record shows, at least offensively. I would say that. Their defense is not very good. But they did, play with the Chiefs toe-to-toe. They did go into overtime with the Ravens. They could very easily have a better record as well. So,
I would say this about the Bengals. They play up and down to whoever they're playing.
Yeah,
sure.
They'll play up with Kansas City and lose close to Kansas City. They almost lost. They had a close game with the New York Giants, right? Where they all of a sudden they only scored 17 points. Like, I don't think the Bengals are a good football team. Like, I think we think the Bengals are good, but because they're usually good and Joe Burrow's out there, but this is a good football team does not have what has happened to them to start this season. A good football team does not lose to what was again, this is a team with a great offense, lost to the only offense in the NFL that's producing worse than the Cleveland Browns offense right now, which is Alex Van Pelt in this New England Patriots offense right now. Like
week
that
is weird.
Yeah, week 1's weird, but this is a team that made an emphasis on being ready for week 1, right? That's all they talked about during camp, getting ready for week 1. And I'm gonna be honest, they look like the team from week 1 when you watch them throughout the season. It's just different versions of that performance all season. So the Cincinnati Bengals don't strike me as a team that's nipping at the heels and they're going to get a couple of things right. They're whack-a-mole, just like every other bad team is whack-a-mole. One week it's the offense is bad, the defense shows up. One week it's the defense that stinks and the offense shows up. They're doing the same whack-a-mole game that we're playing, that every other bad team in the NFL is playing. I think they're just not that good this year for whatever reason.
I guess, I was just kind of maybe pointing out that I think they're probably better than us.
It's a pretty low bar.
Well, they're better than us, but it's not to the points where it matters in the NFL.
Well, that's just
I make this point with the Cowboys and the Steelers game on AFC North Talk, because people were like, "Oh, the Steelers aren't going to lose this game. They're such a good team, and the Cowboys are so bad, and they have all these injuries on defense." I was like, the Steelers just aren't that good of a team to where they aren't going to lose a game to a team that's worse than them. And that's my whole point with the Cincinnati Bengals. If you don't think the Cincinnati Bengals can drop a game to a team that's worse than them, look at the record. They're going to drop a game to the team that's worse than them, especially a team that they traditionally have had problems with in a venue that they have traditionally had problems with. We can bring up that they're always a bad week one team. They're always an awful team in Cleveland in the month of October, especially when Joe Burrow's the quarterback. So, you know, I don't think Joe Burrow's ever won in Cleveland. I think he's only won one time versus the Browns in his whole career. So, yeah, I mean, I would not go into this thinking like the Cincinnati should dog walk you. And I don't think the Browns should walk into this thinking that, you know, understanding that you've had your struggles this year, but you're 2 plays going your way, despite how awful the offense has been, despite how awful the defense has been at times. You're like 2 or 3 plays going your way in the New York game, in the Las Vegas game, and in the what's the last game played? The Philadelphia game. Like 2 penalties from your center away from being a 3-win team here. So it's one of those things where it's just you look at these teams, you're like, they're both kind of these bad teams. So anything can happen in those moments.
Agreed. All right. So I want to hear Quincy, what your thing you think, you know, as we talked a little bit off air. It's about the fan base, and I want to hear that. So let's start with you.
Yeah, let's start it. The thing I think I know for this week is that despite whatever arguments you've gotten into online, don't confuse yourself with that being the reality. Browns fans aren't divided on the Deshaun Watson thing. I think most Browns fans, and I'm saying most, like 80-90% of Browns fans, are okay with this whole thing being over. Are you going to run into some Browns fans who are diehard for Deshaun Watson for whatever reason? Sure. You're going to run into Browns fans who are diehard for DTR or PJ Walker or any other player they decided to make their personality, because the internet is full of people who do something, right? Like, you're going to find a guy who does a thing on the internet, and that thing's going to be PJ Walker standum, right? There's probably somebody becoming a Spencer Rattler stan right now. You could become a stan of anybody for any reason, and you're going to make whatever argument there is. And Deshaun Watson, you know, he was a good quarterback at Clemson. He was a good quarterback in the NFL for the Houston Texans. He's going to have his fair amount of stands and people who are willing to act like this isn't happening in order to preserve what Deshaun did earlier in his career. And I think part of the people defending Deshaun is an effort to preserve what he's done before he's come to Cleveland, right? Because if he's bad now and he's this bad, nobody's going to care how good he was at Clemson or how good he was in Houston. It's just going to become a Marcus Dupree story for those of you who used to watch way too many 30 for 30s back in the day. So I don't think the fan base is divided on the issue of Deshaun Watson. I also think the fan base isn't divided about the fact that Nick Chubb's coming back. That's a big deal for this team. And it's a huge deal for this team because Nick Chubb gives you a lot of things. One, he's a leader on offense. You don't have one right now. 2, he is the offense, right? Like, Nick Chubb is one of those players that you can have an identity with. Now, most of the time we're talking about a team that has an identity. We're talking about a specific player they have that embodies that identity. The Cleveland Browns, despite whatever people think of Kevin Stefanski not running the ball enough, what's their identity been whenever you've watched a national TV commenter talk about the Browns or somebody from Pro Football Talk? What's the first thing that comes out their mouth when they talk about a Kevin Stefanski offense in their mind?
Smash mouth, run the ball, play action.
Yeah, play action, run the ball, football. And why does that exist? Because Nick Chubb is the centerpiece of the Browns offense. This offense has been running without a centerpiece since week 2 of last season. They finally get their centerpiece back. I don't think it's a mistake that they're going to have 4 active running backs on the roster, 4 running backs that they plan on giving carries to, because they didn't want to give carries to Naheem Hines. He wouldn't be on this team at this point, right? But they're giving carries to him. They're giving carries to Nick Chubb. They're giving carries to Deontay Foreman. They're giving carries to Pierre Strong. They gave a lot of carries last week to Pierre Strong, and he actually delivered with those carries.
Good, yeah.
And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this season goes, because in our minds, we're thinking it's only going to go one way, and it's the way that a lot of people think it has to go. I'm not so sure when I look at the schedule ahead that this is going to end as miserably as we're predicting. Now, again, let me make this clear. This is not an endorsement of Deshaun Watson. I think he should be benched immediately. And I think anything that you can achieve with Deshaun Watson in this period of time can be achieved much better with Jameis Winston, who was an 80 PFF grade play action passing quarterback and was 40 of 49 with 4 touchdowns as a play action quarterback the last time he got starting time in 2021, as opposed to Deshaun Watson, who's never been a play action quarterback. If you want to do this style and you're asking me how I would want to do it, I would want to do it with Jameis Winston. But if you're telling me if there's a way to hide Deshaun Watson enough to where you can make it somewhat stomachable that he can be out there, well, you can do it the same way you stomached all these other shitty quarterbacks that have been in Cleveland since 2018. And that's with Nick Chubb, right? And Nick Chubb running the ball a ton, and then you're just throwing the ball off the heels of Nick Chubb. If you're only asking the quarterback to throw screens and throw to the open guy, even if he throws for 60% passing, you can live with the result because you're probably going to get enough chunks to get down the field. It's not going to be a beautiful offense, but it is going to be a good offense. Oh, not a good offense. That's going too far. It's going to be a non-embarrassing offense. It's going to be, it's going to be not functional, because again, I think they would be functional with Jameis. With Deshaun, I still think they would be sub-functional. But you know what? You would be able to compete. You would have a competable offense, right? Where you don't feel like the game's doomed if somebody scores 14 points, which, by the way, the Browns offense is averaging less than 14 points.
That would be a massive improvement, Q.
An explosion.
Yeah,
that would be a massive.
So if we get to the point where we can score 20 points and win a couple games here, we'd be excited. But the truth is, if you look at this schedule, the Bengals, we just talking about, they're not that good of a team this year. They're not a good defensive unit. They're not a really disciplined and consistent offensive unit. They have their issues against Cleveland for whatever reason. Baltimore, that's not going to be an easy winnable game. I don't think I would predict the Browns to win that game. But it's a division game, and these division games always are close. You can squeeze one out if you get lucky against a Baltimore team. And, the Browns defense has figured something out against Lamar Jackson the last few times they've been going at him. I think the last time he's exploded on this defense was when DTR played. And before that, it was the Dookie Scoot game on Monday Night Football, right? Other than that, the Browns defense has been able to kind of contain him a bit. We don't know who the Chargers are at this point, so we'll see what they are when you play them. You got the New Orleans Saints, who I'm watching right now. They stink, just like we stink. The Steelers are about to play Russell Wilson, so we'll see how that goes. Because if you're talking about bad quarterback play, yeah, buddy, Russ is just as bad as everybody else we talked about. Then you play Bo Nix. I think you can beat a Bo Nix team. And then Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh. Hey, look, man, I don't think this is the year we win in Pittsburgh. I'm just going to put that one out there. But you get Kansas City. It's going to be tough. Cincinnati, I think that's a game you can win because Cincinnati's not that good. Miami. And then even when you play Baltimore, again, it's week 18. They're probably not going to be playing that game with their starters. So you can really squeeze out a decent result here at the end of the season. The question is how motivated you're going to be to do it and how united you're going to be. And with Nick Chubb coming back, it at least gives people, Browns fans, something to root for on offense, because that's been missing, especially in this portion of the season. David Njoku was injured for most of it. When he got back, he really wasn't rolling the way we were used to him rolling. Even if he is, he's a tight end. He doesn't get the ball all the time. We've really had nothing to root for offensively as fans. If you're a Browns player, you have nothing to believe in offensively because your quarterback stinks. Your quarterback can't get the ball to anybody. And your offensive line's not that great to where they're going to elevate Jerome Ford to look like a top tier running back, right? Now you have a guy who can elevate an offensive line with Nick Chubb. And it's something that you can believe in, and it's something that this team can believe in, and it's something the fan base can believe in. Now, we'll see what they do week 10 in the bye week, because I think by then they'll realize, hey, even while doing this, we're probably leaving points on the table. Let's just move on if they feel like they have a chance to actually achieve something. I think that's an important part. They're not going to bench Watson if they think that they're going to go winless for the rest of the season, because to them, what would be the point? So you got to do something in this next stretch of games to make it clear that you could be better. You can get better, but you also have to have enough there to achieve to make it worth making that change. Because right now, if you end this stretch and let's say the Browns are 1-8, but at the bye week,
yeah.
I mean, then who cares who's playing quarterback at that point? If you somehow get to, let's see, 2 wins here, 3 3-6 or 3-5 or whatever that would be. I'm not the greatest at the math here. But if you get to 3 wins there, or maybe even 4 wins there, then you're thinking, okay, hey, we got New Orleans, we got Pittsburgh, we got Denver, we got Pittsburgh again. We can make a run here, get over 500, see what happens. Yeah. And if that's the case, we want to get the best out of our offense. And I know they've been lying to us about who gives us the best chance to win on Sunday. But we all know, I mean, the city of Cleveland pretty much universally called bullshit on that, the same way they universally called bullshit on it's a decoy, right? Like, this is what I mean by united. We're not really falling for the traps anymore when it comes to what the Browns are trying to pull or what Deshaun is or is not doing. We're not debating whether he should be out there anymore. We're all kind of in unison about he should be benched. And what we can do if we do bench him. But I also think that there's stuff you could do around him while you're trying to get to the point to bench him that will make it easier to make the point that you should bench him.
Yeah, I guess I'm just baffled by why they aren't there yet. You have all this data laying out how statistically he's like the worst quarterback like ever. And really, like, some of it is really god awful stuff. And this is an organization that believes in analytics. They have the data. They see it. I mean, what was the stat I gave you earlier? Like 7 out of 700. Yeah.
Because I've been trying to think about it. And I'm like, do you think the data being as bad as it is part of why they're hesitant? And I mean that in, like, if this was like within the range of what they expected, but on the negative side.
Oh, so they
would trust the data more, like, but it's so bad that they're like, wow, it can't be this bad, right? Yeah, like, I think we've all been there. Like, if you check your thermostat and it's like, it was 40 the day before, and you check your thermostat for what the temperature is outside, and it's like negative 12. You're like, there's no way that's as bad as it is, right? Like, it's something broken there that's not accounting for it. I'm wondering if, like, that plays a part into it. I also think, and this is something like, narratives are narratives, and I believe the Baker Mayfield thing to be a narrative because we lived through it. We knew what was not going to continue after 2021, especially after certain points, right? In 2021, we forget that, like, yeah, he was injured, but then he also threw for like 300 yards against Cincinnati, and then he was injured again, like, somehow after that. Like, the whole shoulder gate stuff, it was what it was at the time, and I think we've forgotten with time. But the optics that they're aware of you traded for Deshaun Watson, and this is what Baker Mayfield looks like right now, probably puts pressure on them to keep him out there. Again, I'm not justifying it. I don't confuse this with I'm trying to understand why it is they're making this poor decision, so I can, like, understand what is going on and what can, like, get them out of it. But I think of those things, like, if the numbers being, like, as bad because they're telling them right now, this dude who used to be a top 5 quarterback in 2020 is playing worse than every quarterback the Browns have had since 2011. And, like, that is such a bad result that, like, if you were paid to pay attention to it, you'd be like, man, it got to be an outlier, right? Like, that can't make sense. But it kind of does. And also, there's pride in there, right? There's a mix of things. There's pride, like, we made this trade and it's not working out and it looks really bad on us. And then the Baker Mayfield thing kind of amplifies that, where it's like, well, we got to make this look good. Maybe Baker will play bad for a couple weeks and Deshaun will play good, and then maybe we look right. And it's just, honestly, we would all be better served to have an intervention and just take 4 out the lineup. But I'm just trying to understand how we're making these bad decisions, because it's one thing to say it's a bad decision and it's stupid. We all recognize that. I'm just trying to understand how we're getting to this stupid place, how very smart people are making these very bad decisions.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about the fan base. I think everybody is pretty much aligned with that. You get your outliers here and there who are like, oh, it doesn't make a difference who's in quarterback with the offensive line the way it is. But that's just untrue at this point.
Or you get people who want to make a point about, like, Bill Callahan, right? Like, people pick and choose their points that they come into the season with. Bill Callahan, that's going to destroy this team. We've heard that take all off season. And, like, now they can get it off, but it's like, also, who's also a bad offensive line
Yeah,
right now.
even though the Titans have a worse ranked.
Or you have the people who wanted to hire Mike Vrabel the whole time, and now like the Browns are losing enough to where they could get that off clean, even though Mike Vrabel was kind of a failure his last few years in Tennessee, and somehow Derrick Henry looks like he's gotten the fountain of youth again in Baltimore. Once he's left the Mike Vrabel system, well, not the Mike Vrabel system because he's defensive coordinator, but Mike Vrabel's teams. I don't know, man. It's just there's a lot of people getting a lot off, and when the team stinks, everybody gets everything off, and sometimes those are bad takes, but they don't go challenged.
All right, Case, where you at, brother?
Well, and when Quincy says like we're not divided, and the reason you might get the perception that we are is because the 10% of people who are still riding with Watson, they're loud, so they're out there and you see them.
They are,
but it's just an inability. Like when new information
minority
presents itself, you're allowed to change your mind, and some people want to die on hills. Because like in rewind 2017, the draft comes. I wanted to draft Deshaun Watson in 2017. So as a player, when we traded for him, I'm like, okay, cool. This is the guy I was behind coming out of college. But when the new information piles up, you're allowed to change your mind. You can see what's on the field. You get to see the tape and it's not there. And if you're still on that and you're going to die on that hill, I mean, I can't stop you, but at the same time, man, it's the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting new results. And that's where we're at here. We sat here after the Dallas game and he had a single-digit quarterback rating. And we're like, okay, well, if he does that again, they got to pull the plug. And then we went 3 games. There was no trajectory, a little up, a little down. And then we had another single-digit quarterback rating game, and they didn't pull the plug. For me, that was the point of no returns. When you get to halftime of that game, and you don't send Jameis out after halftime. And it's like, oh, you guys are committing to this, and I'm at a loss for words, the fact that he's starting this game coming up. Like, I don't know what more information could present itself in the meanwhile that leads you to believe that this is a good idea. So they're riding it out, and I hope they get to the bye and come to their senses. But at that point, so much damage could be done that what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with that remaining time? Is it going to be Winston or is it going to be DTR? Or to Quincy's point, does it even matter if you're 1-8? It could get untenable really quick. But ballsy on their part to say the things they've said this week and stick Deshaun Watson in front of this home crowd. Because if they don't get off to a fast start, it's going to get ugly so quickly. Like this might reach it. We've seen some things in this last 25 years. This might reach the most untenable you've been at home. And you went 1-31, but there was no expectations with 1-31. This team had expectations and they failed to meet them severely this year. So the fact they haven't pulled them and they're still starting them, I don't know where this ends. I don't know what the trajectory looks like. But as Quincy's right, like 90% of the fan base smells the bullshit. Like this is, so we're not divided. We all know what it is. We know what the score is.
And the split isn't 90-10 people who like still ride with Deshaun. It's like 90% of people are like actively want to bench. 5% of people are like, I don't know if it would change anything. And then like 4% of people are just indifferent about it. And there's like 1% of people who I don't even know if they're loud. I just think they're shameless.
Fair. That's fair. You hear them a lot on the radio and shit, though.
And who calls in the radio talk shows? It's usually the most shameless folk. No offense if you are a reasonable person that calls in the radio talk shows.
So I wrote in Things I Think I Know this week that the Browns are gaslighting the shit out of their fans with this Watson stuff, telling them that he gives them the best chance to win. We all know it's untrue. They're telling us otherwise, and it's not fair to the fan base or the locker room. Otherwise, but Tuesday or Monday after Sunday, when he was like, I don't take anything Stefanski says after the game for anything. Like when he says, "Oh, we're still rolling with 4," I'm like, okay, he gets that one. I got to hear him say it again on Monday after he's watched the film, talked to everybody. Like I thought, and then Monday, I don't know if you guys watched the press conference. They were like an hour late. And then they went Foreman for the players. I thought for sure the change was coming because I was like, this is weird. And even Stainbrook was like, yeah, usually, and Fred were like, usually they send an email if they're going to change the times. They were just flat out late. Like they just sat on YouTube with like just the backdrop at the podium for like an hour, right? And then they had Foreman go up, somebody else. I'm like, the change is coming. Nope. Comes up there. It's still Watson. I was pissed. I was blown away. That's when I read the article, right? The other thing is like, so at this point, you would think that Stefanski is, and you guys said it's interesting how two different people look at desperate behavior in two different ways, right? Like Quincy, it was interesting. You described it as desperate. They're desperate to try to save this, so they're hanging on to him. And that's an interesting way to look at it, right? Because I look at like they should be desperate to try to do anything else but what they're doing. And that desperation should look like change. So desperation can look like two different things, right?
And I think that the financial component here, right, kind of changes what the debt. If
it should.
What's a good example of it? What is the worst purchase you have ever made, Brad? Or Casey, if you have like a good one in here to throw in. What's the worst purchase you have ever made?
God, I've made a lot of bad ones when I was younger, but you know,
like let's say a big time purchase.
Oh, man. What did I bought? Okay, I bought my friend's car when I was living in California.
I'll use my brother's example. My brother has a great
saved me
example.
an embarrassing story. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was about to give one.
My brother, when he was delivering pieces, decided to buy a SS Monte Carlo. Right, you know, one of the ones that look like the NASCAR, NASCAR joints. And he bought rims for this Monte Carlo that he was driving to pizza deliveries, by the way. So like think about the Target. We lived on the east side of Cleveland, the Target on his back that he was just like, hey, a shining rob me sign. And him driving that car had obvious drawbacks that I noticed as a kid, drawbacks that my dad was like, hey, you sure you want to deliver pizzas in that car? And my brother's like, oh no, I paid for it, I want to drive the car, right? And my brother was so stubborn to let that Monte Carlo go. He had a kid. He was putting the kid in a 2-door car. You know how stupid you got to feel to put a car seat in a 2-door car? Like he was out here doing that, and he was going to justify it because he already had spent so much money on the car itself. It had to work. And it took him forever to let that thing go because he wanted to justify the purchase. He wanted the more people told him it was stupid, the more he wanted to prove them wrong that it wasn't stupid, right? The more people told you, hey, that was probably the worst way to spend 20 grand that I've ever seen somebody spend 20 grand over a period of time, the more he wanted to prove people right, the more stubborn he got on it. I think that's my whole point of like, they spent $230 million on the quarterback, and they've had to justify that decision for 3 years because when they traded for that quarterback while he was accused of what he was accused of. And that has made them have to get in an immediately defensive place about Deshaun Watson since day one, right? They brought him in. They had to defend the decision. He played his first 6 games. They had to defend the decision because he didn't look great, right? It was 700-day layoff. And then he played in 2023. And like they kind of defended the decision then because he wasn't that bad in 2023. But everybody's talking about it like he's as bad as he is now. So they defended the decision. And in 2024, they're just used to defending the decision because everybody has told. Like, I think all of these things can make you super blind to it. And I think the only thing that's going to wake them up is when they realize how done the fan base is with it. I just wonder if Nick Chubb being there is going to mute it enough to where they can continue to be blind about it. But I don't really think that's going to be the case because I think they're going to make it fairly obvious that Deshaun Watson is no longer welcome here. Again, the fans are united on this, right? The only people who are not on the side of this are the people, unfortunately, who are making the decisions, but they will see just how united the fan base is because I haven't seen the fan base agree on one thing like this ever. In my time doing this. Maybe when Baker Mayfield first was having good games and we all were like, yeah, it's going to be a franchise guy. That's even then there was a lot of skepticism about that, right? Like, I mean, even when Baker was playing well in 2020, there was skepticism about it. So I think this is probably as together I've seen the fan base on at least one topic. Now, how you get that topic done, if that topic would be fixed, like, yeah, we're all always divided on that, who you draft to fix it or whatever the hell people want to do. Yeah, we're going to argue about that. But as far as like, does Watson need to be benched? That is a pretty popular, you can get elected in the state of Ohio running in that platform, no matter what political party you're affiliated with. If you're like, hey, if I get in office, I'm a bench Deshaun Watson. You're going to win Cuyahoga County. You're going to win Columbia. You're going to win the whole damn state if you're on that platform, because it's that popular of a thing. I get texts from people who don't even watch football telling me how the Browns are still asking me how the Browns are still starting Deshaun Watson at this point. It's a 99% popular issue here that Watson should be on the bench. And that's what they're going to see on Sunday when they roll up into the stadium, is that, oh, this isn't a 50-50, fan base is divided. This is a 90% issue where like everybody's tired of the quarterback.
How much does Nick Chubb's presence on Sunday shield that reaction from the crowd?
Depends on how many snaps he gets. Right? Like if he gets 10 snaps, he's not going to be out there enough to shield it.
Yeah.
But if he gets like 20 snaps and they're moving the ball, I mean, look,
not shield by his play.
Yeah.
Shield by his presence.
Just
like
the vibes.
I initially said, Case, to you, that this game would be without Nick Chubb even coming back this game. I think the situation in Cleveland on Sunday would be
it's going to sound like
that it would have gone off in the pregame. Like they would have been throwing stuff on the field potentially in the pregame. Like that's how mad people are.
But Nick buys them a little grace. That. Yeah, Nick will buy them a little grace. But like, how many 3-and-outs can they sustain before it
out of the respect
tips
for
the
Nick
other
Chubb,
way?
They ain't gonna boo the team when they come out.
No, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. I think it's like a wrestling match where it's like Nick Chubb's the baby face and Deshaun's the heel. Like they'll just cheer Nick Chubb and then boo Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
And then they'll make it very clear that they're booing Deshaun Watson. It's not just going to be boos. They're going to get creative. We've seen Cleveland do it. They'll just chant Watson sucks. We want Winston. Like fire Kevin. Right? Like they're going to very pointedly point their anger at whoever it is that needs to be pointed to. And then in between all of that, Chubb, Myles Garrett, right? Like we know who the fans are angry at. They know who they're angry at. And they're going to point that anger very pointedly at Deshaun. It's not going to be confusing. They're going to be capable of doing both things. Appreciating Nick Chubb and what he brings to this team, and also letting it be known that at this point, like I think some of the fan base wouldn't even care if they're winning the game. Like they're just going to boo him, right? Like it is what it is. They want him gone. They're tired of this, and they've been tired of it for like a number of years now, and they haven't gotten the results to justify it. So I think they'll be able to figure it out. Like I don't think it's just going to be blanket booing. I don't think it ever was going to be blanket booing because that wouldn't be ugly. What's ugly is when they're saying, no, you suck. Not y'all suck. You. Number 4. Yeah, with the tape on his shoes. You suck. You're garbage, right? I just hope nobody takes it too far with like some kind of graphic imagery on a sign or something like that.
Yeah, I feared taking it too far, like throwing stuff on the field and things like that. I honestly feared that coming in before I knew Chubb was coming back.
The Browns already showed you how cognizant they are of this, though, because they sent Nick Chubb out for the presser before Deshaun to kind of lighten the mood, you know what I mean, as the buffer.
They're using him as a human shield.
Yeah, they're going
to do like a Batman entrance for Nick Chubb coming back and put out and turn off the lights, and that's when Deshaun's going to run on the field. Like, they're going to sneak him out. They know he's not popular. When's the last time you seen him tweet about Deshaun being the quarterback on the Twitter page? They don't want us to think about the fact that Deshaun is the starting quarterback of the team and the highest paid player on the team currently. They don't want us to think about that right now. But the fans are going to think about that, and it's just going to be it's going to be something interesting. And Brad, I'll just say this: is throwing stuff on the field going too far in the city of Cleveland? We're kind of known for it.
I know. That's what makes it embarrassing. Like if they do it again,
that is what the entire dog pound was founded on. Was dudes throwing stuff at the field.
Oh, I agree. I'm saying like Bottlegate 2.0 Watson, like it's just the uglier it gets, the more embarrassing it gets for everybody involved,
They don't
right?
let you get anything heavy now, so we kind of ruined
Yes,
that. You
that's
got to
the
get the
point.
cups, and then they take off their caps of the
Yeah.
bottled water, and nobody's going to
You're
throw a
right.
full thing of bottled water because that's just kind of, you're going to get it spilled all over everybody, and also it's $5, right? So
Good point. All right.
now
So
what you
maybe
can
not the
bring,
throwing
and
thing, but
I'm not encouraging this, but you can bring cough drops.
cough drops.
Loophole.
Skittles they used to throw at
Yeah.
in Seattle.
You can bring small snacks in the
Small
stadium with
snacks.
as long as they're in a 10-gallon plastic bag.
There you go.
Not suggesting anybody do anything.
Correct. The last thing I'll say about this is you make a good point about them being stubborn and the purchase. It's just like two of them are businessmen. They understand sunk cost fallacy. They understand the data is in.
Mhm.
The fan base is irate. You're 1-5. Kevin Stefanski, I know, is smart. He's watching the same film we are. I know he knows that his quarterback play is god awful.
You can tell by just how he structured the offense last week.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
right? Like
So-
it's obvious that he knows.
I
Now, as
just
far as like,
don't
do they know
get
how
it.
mad the fans are? I really don't think they know. Like how frustrated the fans are. They've been on the road the last 3 weeks, and the only
I
place they've
know,
really
they
been in
should
is in
know.
Korea. So like they've been in a little bit of a bubble. I don't think they really. I think this like the reason why it feels like they're not reading the room. They ain't been in the room in like a
They
month.
should be just
Yeah.
as mad.
And it's different in the NFL. Like it's different with these players. They're just not going to be as mad as fans are about this because like the way that they work and have to operate is always going to be different than how we operate. Because like part of our calculation with this is like, hey, you want fan enthusiasm to be up because that allows us to do our thing, right? Like they're not really thinking about that. They're just like, nah, Deshaun's like a former Pro Bowler. He should be good eventually, right? Like they're just they also know the dude, and maybe they like the dude behind the scenes, like in their personal interactions with him. I don't know. I've never
I find that hard to believe.
I've never interacted with Deshaun, so I would not know what that's like. So
It's hard to like him from a distance, I'll tell you that much.
yeah,
He's
I mean,
become
it would
surly.
definitely be one of those things where it's difficult to like somebody from a distance, but it might be one of those things where you've been up close to him, it's easier to like him. He seems to have a lot of people who likes him in the NFL. Like that is a fair thing to say about Washington. So yeah, and he might be really generous. Like it's the same thing with Odell, where people didn't like him from a distance, but then like you get to his teammates and they just love him. So
I got that though, because he has like charisma, but Deshaun don't really have that charisma. I don't know.
we don't really know who
Maybe
Deshaun
person to
is.
person is different.
I
than
think
it comes off
everything
their
that's come out about Deshaun since 2020, and I think I'm being 100% fair when I say this, tells us we have no idea who this man is
That's true.
from just watching the football of him. I don't know who that man is behind closed doors. I don't know what he's like.
Though.
I have no clue.
I agree. You're right. And I shouldn't even pretend to even know, like I even know what but I'll tell you this, he's become surly and arrogant and aloof in his pressers, which he wasn't last year. And he is now this year. And that's irritating to me. I'll just say that.
I'll say this. I think ownership has a little bit of knowledge of how the fans feel because the Monday after the Washington game, the ticket brokers were calling it Black Monday. So many season ticket holders canceled their season tickets for going forward that Monday. So that kind of information will make its way to ownership. Now, whether Barry and Stefanski are privy to how ticket sales are going, I don't know. But I know ownership feels that. J.W. Johnson feels that when you got season ticket holders saying, we're done here. You know, and then so that'll be how it gets to Jimmy. And that'll be if Jimmy gets involved, it's going to be because his pockets are getting thinner. And that's all Jimmy is to us at this point, just his pockets.
Do you think, last question for you guys, do you think they really, in their heart of hearts, any of those three, Haslam, Barry, or Stefanski, do you think any of those three really think it's in the realm of outcomes that somehow Watson plays himself out of this and saves face?
They're trying to squeeze blood out of a stone. Like, I don't know.
But do you think any of the three actually truly
Jimmy might.
that?
Jimmy's, I don't know, how much ball he actually knows, but like,
Because I can't imagine that any three of them don't already picture 2025 with somebody else at quarterback.
See, that's a different conversation than like, can you get through the season with them though?
What's the point
Yeah.
of getting through the season with them though?
I don't. Again, it's not logical. I'm just telling you. That's two different questions. Like if you're asking them, do you think there's a way that Watson can be hidden for the whole season to where you can get to the end of the year? They seem to want to end things as amicably as possible with this dude for whatever reason. I don't understand it. I don't agree with it. I don't appreciate that this is what they're trying to do. But I remember talking to somebody about this. It's like they're trying to like figure out how they're going to move on from a franchise quarterback or somebody like that, like Big Ben at the end, right? Where you realize he was cooked and you kind of didn't want him to go back, but you gave him the graceful exit.
They owe him nothing.
Do this. They owe him nothing. I would have treated him like a regular quarterback starting after that week 1 performance. Because I said on the show, you just got to treat him like a regular quarterback at this point.
Yeah.
Like he's no longer franchise. But that's not where they're at. I can't try to talk about these things as if it's like where I want them to be. Yeah. I have to kind of meet them where they're at, is if they're even at a wacky place with it. And I think if you ask them, is there a way that he turns it around enough to where you could justify playing him for the rest of the season? I think they do believe that that's a possibility if you limit him enough and make his choices as simple as possible. Again, it's like taping a muffler. We should just get a new car at that point, right? But for whatever reason, they really want to drive that damn car, right? If we feel like the mechanics being like, hey, this thing is probably totaled. It makes no sense to put a new alternator in here, but they want to drive that car one last time for whatever reason they want to do it. And it's just that decision is whatever it is, and the consequences of that decision are what they are. But I think they look at this the end slate of the season. They think to themselves, we can get a couple wins here, and if maybe Watson turns it around. I also think they want to get past the 6-game hump, because Watson has never played more than 6 consecutive starts for the Cleveland Browns. So maybe they have a number in mind that they really want to get to before they start to make a judgment on this thing. It's very
maybe halftime is a chance.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to prepare myself for the disappointment that it's probably just going to happen at the bye week, because here's my prediction, and we'll see if I'm right. We'll see if this ages well. They're going to beat Cincinnati, and he might look decent versus Cincinnati. They're not going to beat Baltimore, but it's not going to be embarrassing. It might be a game where it's close, and then he's going to drop a stanker against the Chargers, and then they make the move during the bye week.
Way too late.
Well, Quincy, who do they pivot to at that point?
You can make the argument that it should pivot to DTR at that point. I think they want to evaluate. The question is, who do you want to evaluate more, DTR or Ken Dorsey?
I think you also got to evaluate Jameis, because don't you think he's in the realm of options as a bridge for next year?
I think if they have to get a bridge for next year, that would probably be one of the last people they would get with, because if, let's say, he plays well at the end of this year and proves he can be a bridge, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So, and they're going to be in a situation where they're paying a quarterback not to play. I think they want to play DTR in that situation, because he's only making $1 million for the next 3 years. So I think you would want to see Jameis out there just so you can evaluate what this Ken Dorsey offense looks like. And then you probably put DTR in the final stretch of the season.
Yeah, I know DTR is going to see time this year for sure. I just didn't know if they would try to get Jameis out there and give him a look first.
Because it's going to be hard to evaluate, because you want to evaluate, okay, where's Jerry Jeudy? Is he a number 1 receiver in a normal Stefanski offense? You want to evaluate where Cedric Tillman is. And DTR could play to a level where you can evaluate that, but it's also possible he could be so bad that you can't really evaluate those things as well, because that's kind of
can't evaluate them now. I know that much.
Yeah. And that's also the thing that's been bugging me. I can't evaluate anything else going on with this team as long as you're playing Deshaun Watson at quarterback, because now we're not even running the offense anymore. We're just running stuff that we're putting training wheels on Deshaun to keep him upright. Again, if this were me, I would have benched Deshaun a while ago, but I would have benched him after the DC game. Like, it is what it is. But I also am not Jimmy Haslam and did not drop $230 million in the bank on this dude to play quarterback. I'm also not Andrew Berry and spent 3 first-round picks of draft currency that I'm usually excited to use to get him in here. And I'm not Kevin Stefanski, who spent the last 3 years trying to adjust and create an offense around this guy. And when you put that much in it, there's a reason why the sunk cost fallacy is something we are very aware of, but yet we continue to fall into as people because you spend that much time and you just don't want to give up. And that's partly like kind of what makes people good at their job at times, is that they're not going to give up super easily. And maybe that's been something that's benefited us with this regime, Kevin and Andrew Berry, that, hey, look, Deshaun goes out for the season last year. They don't give up on the season. They get Joe Flacco and they try to make something out of it. And that's resolve, right? But here that resolve is working against him. So it might be a situation where it's like, it's something that helps you when they're right, something that hurts you when they're wrong. But it's just kind of part of the package for somebody who has that resolve that you like when it's going well. There's a number of ways I could write a book. There's so many chapters to it. But I try every day to find a different way to look at it, because I don't want to just fall into saying the same stuff every time I open my mouth to talk about the Browns. I'm searching for different ways to think about it that can be closer to where they're at, so I can figure that out. It's just my daily search here.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard right now. I think we're all kind of searching there, looking for that, and it's difficult. Well said, though.
Okay, I got excited. YSU grad just got like a 20-yard run. All right.
Who did?
Jaleel McLaughlin, YSU grad, best running back in school history. And also Notre Dame college history.
I've got his receiving prop tonight. I hope he got over it. So.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a little toss sweep. So it was a rushing play for about 20 yards.
There we go. We'll take it. You got any parting words for us, Case Dog?
Now I was going to kind of touch on what Quincy just said, like the same thing we praised them for, being in lockstep, all being in unison, being all and unified in their plan is the same thing we're dealing with now, except it isn't appealing to us because they're in lockstep of keeping this dude on the field. But keep in mind, they signed their extensions late after the schedule came out. So they definitely mapped it out of what contingencies, what could happen. So they probably have an end point in mind. We just don't know what that is. The bye does come at a convenient time halfway through the season after 9 games. So if you were going to reset everything, that would be a point in time to do it. I think the fact that they scrapped their offensive philosophy already, they brought in all these guys to formulate an offense around a guy and already hit the pause button on it, shows you that they are malleable, that they're and in fact, we did see it last week. The running game got better, got more efficient. You were under center more. You didn't have as many pass attempts. You were throwing a ton of more screens. So that was their way to get through. They might continue to do that until they can make that final judgment. And then I don't know what the offense looks like on the other side.
And the Cooper trade
is
also a sign that
they're making all the moves of a team that's going to eventually bench their starting quarterback.
Yes.
Like that part to me it's a question of when, not if they do it. And I think the fans are on a different timeline than they are. I think they're thinking about this of how do we bench? Like, we're basically ending this era with Deshaun Watson, and we're like, just get fucking rid of him. Right, like it's just 2 completely different places that I think there are, but I think they'll catch up to speed once they see how done the fan base is over this 3-game home stretch and start to accelerate things.
I hope so. I hope you're right. Good job, guys. Great job. Another edition of Things I Think I Know. Enjoy it. Go into a good football weekend here. Enjoy it. Enjoy your weekend. Keep it locked at the OBR for 24/7 coverage of the Cleveland Browns as they get ready for the Bengals at home on Sunday. And we'll talk all about it and we'll write all about it. So keep it locked. For Quincy Carrier, follow him on Twitter at Quinn_C. Casey Kinnamon on Twitter at Casey_Kinnamon. My name is Brad Ward. Have a wonderful weekend. We are out.